I'm Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., and this is how to get your money right. We want to welcome to How to Get Your Money Right one of our nation's key innovators in community and neighborhood development, April D. Simone of Vesey. Welcome to How to Get Your Money Right.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
So you come from the boogie down Bronx.
I do.
So how do you get from the Bronx to be an architect?
I think very young, just understanding how my built environment influenced me, whether it was the sound of food or music, block parties, and then also being very keenly aware that I would go from pledging allegiance to a flag in school and coming home and realizing a tale of two Americas. And from very young, I really understood what it meant to have and what it meant not to have. And it influenced me about beauty. How can we use architecture or design to create beautiful spaces that amplify our being, our belonging, where we live, what we are connected to? And that really influenced my trajectory, both in the design practice and policy practice, to say we have a duty.
But how does an architect get into community development, neighborhood development? Explain that transition.
It started actually more recent. You know, I've been in design field for quite some time around housing issues and really amplifying more equitable housing trajectories in America. I think home, democracy needs a place to stand. And for me, home always meant that, like how—
Home ownership.
And redefining home ownership. I think not just that I can own a home, it's how that home operated in this bigger ecosystem of place. So I went from looking at, home in the traditional sense to, wow, home means so much more, again, coming from the Bronx. And more recently in 2022, my husband and I went to purchase a home.
In what city?
In Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay.
And, a lot of these communities have suffered from decades of disinvestment because of policies like redlining or urban renewal. And I think these are the canvases that really can amplify belonging and coming back into our spaces. So my naivety after traveling the country and being a poster child with an exhibit called Undesign the Red Line, thought we can come back. And this is post George Floyd. We go in, we put our offer in for the home. Ultimately, we end up missing 3 closings, and $800,000 of buying power becomes only $360,000 of buying power because of appraisals and other people's determination of valuation of our communities.
Sounds like redlining.
Bingo, modern day redlining. It's still denying and creating barriers and creating, stifling opportunity for opportunities.
For the sake of our audience,
Yep.
How would you define redlining?
Redlining is a practice that gained momentum during the New Deal policies, when the federal government, particularly the Federal Housing Administration, uses maps to determine where investments are going to come and lending is going to happen and where it wasn't going to happen. So it becomes institutionalized by the federal government. But if we kind of look at the whole concept of redlining, it's a spatialized psychology to say, I'm going to put a line around haves and have-nots. And that's been happening since the first boats landed on this continent. It's reinforced this hierarchy of human value. So redlining in the more traditional sense is about lending, but it's much more deeper than that. For me, it's about redlining democracy, when we don't have access to have freedom and mobility to pursue happiness the way we want to define that.
My background is civil rights. And one of the things we found out that as we desegregated public accommodations, desegregated institutions, the biggest challenge was desegregating communities, desegregating neighborhoods because of the prevalence of redlining. That was 40, 50 years ago. Going forward, is there a decline in redlining, or is it maintained some medium, or is it going up?
In the more, again, back to the traditional sense, it was Jim Crow or these segregation laws that said you weren't going to lend or you're not going to be able to live in a certain way. But now it's economic redlining, because even in our communities where no one would come in to our backyard, when we have access to live in these spaces now, we're still denied the ability to fix. We got to remember a lot of our infrastructure in our communities have declined. So we need resources to fix these spaces. Well, who do we turn to if the valuation and appraisal process is still making the determination of how money is going to come in to our communities? Then we're competing with private equity firms that have those resources through investors that can buy low, flip, and then sell high, which then to me creates, now you had something that was $100,000, now it goes up to $2 or $3 million. So we're redlined from ever being able to come back into those communities that once presented opportunities for us to live in.
From your informed perspective, have we made progress since 1968 Fair Housing Act, or is it, where are we now? We need to renew the act, we need to strengthen it. Where are we in terms of federal law in regards to redlining?
I think when we look at the confluence of factors, it's a psychology that we're still up against that hasn't shifted since 1968. It's this determination of who's deserving and undeserving to have access to this concept of the American dream. And for me, we have much, much more to go, because simultaneously wages and income have not kept up with the pace of acquisition of assets or affordability. And we're in this sort of holding space where if you can't get access to capital investment or resources that really penetrate a different narrative, right? We're so accustomed to the poverty narrative that we'll invest if it looks like this. But if it looks like a Queen Anne Victorian that belongs in Princeton, that's not deserving of the types of investments that we need to have in our community. And we're seeking to change and shift that. So in my opinion, we still have a long way to go, because we have regressed since 1968. And our buying power is not the same. And we're competing with people who have hundreds of millions in investment to come in and acquire assets. But where does that leave most of us when we want to do the same?
Vesey is in New Jersey, but your mission is across the country. You're national. What is the mission of Vesey?
Vesey is really to create an ecosystem of home that prioritizes people in neighborhoods. It's about centering purpose when we acquire assets and creating different pathways. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's people that want to live in homes, single-family homes. Well, we want to give that opportunity too. There's people who are okay living in apartments. We want to give that opportunity too. But we center purpose through our acquisition, and we create pathways of ownership that we fundamentally have started what's called a perpetual purpose trust, which holds assets. And then through that trust, we're able in perpetuity to, again, create opportunities for occupants that either can be shared ownership opportunities, rentals, but it all works towards creating more stability and recalibrating assets.
Does each neighborhood need the trust, or you develop a national trust for all of these properties?
Following suit to companies like BlackRock and others, we'll create one national trust to leverage our portfolio of assets so that we're able to dispense resources as needed across this country. And we're not unique in doing this.
And again, most people may not know what BlackRock is, but it's one of the most successful private equity ventures in the world, not just in the United States. Do you have some interplay, some discussion, some intersection between what you do and a company like BlackRock?
Absolutely. And it's using a market approach to address our most pressing societal challenges. I think across the board, not just in Black and brown communities, all Americans are up against housing costs, are up against commercial spaces to start small businesses, how to do that affordably. Our intersection is, why not acquire property just like BlackRock is doing, but instead of just paying shareholder dividends out, we recirculate that appreciation and value back to community and purpose that really creates more equilibrium and sustainability in the long term versus just extractive economies. So there is the nexus in profit, but there's how we use that profit to drive purpose.
Because we live in a historical context of housing discrimination, Obviously, there have been some advances made. Before we started the program, I asked you something about your heritage, Italian. So how does an Italian from the South Bronx get involved with not only architecture, but besides the drawings, but actually affect people's opportunity to live in a home or live in a property where there's some future? A lot of cities now are facing gentrification. How does Vesey deal with the issue of gentrification?
It's another great question. And I'm biracial. And growing up and seeing the two dichotomies between a Black household and an Italian household, not so much being integrated because of my mother's identity. I would go to pools in places like Port Washington, Long Island, and family members would be in that same pool. And there was no acknowledgement that we were blood related because of, again, this psychology of othering, of hierarchy, of human value. Again, when you're very young, that impresses upon you your surroundings, your neighborhoods, your environment. So then we would go back to our block in the Bronx, and that would be impressionable upon me. So how do I get from going from those experiences to wanting to cultivate neighborhoods that begin to deconstruct the imposition that has been placed upon you, upon me, upon so many of us around human value?
Let me ask you, the fact that you are biracial, would you say that has enhanced your perception of the reality of these various forms of housing discrimination?
Absolutely. And, to be very clear, learning from my father, who is Italian, just what they faced, Italian Americans, and discriminatory housing practices has really influenced this civil rights mentality to say, if we really want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to exist, we have to assume stewardship of that and be intentional. It's not osmosis, or it's not just going to rise up. You being a civil rights leader, it was intentional. You got up every day, you've passed this baton to me, and it's for me to say, how do we now shape our built environment to reflect a practice of democracy? How does, when you walk down the street, when you look at housing, or you look at a commercial business, or whatever you see is going to tell you, here's democracy at its best, and here's how we work towards scaling it. That's the agency we want to create in people. And we have so much work to deconstruct that psychology, because even the most progressive spaces still see hierarchy. Like, this is what you can get if you can afford it. If you can afford this, this is what you get. And what we're saying is that doesn't work, and it hasn't worked.
That's a good segue. In America today, we live in a multiracial, multilingual, multicultural democracy. And you would think that as our nation becomes much more diverse, there would be an embrace of diversity rather than a fear of it. So, given that context, how do you navigate around some of the fears of change, the fears of inclusiveness? How do you navigate around that?
I think it's how we learn and our proximity to one another. We recently launched an exhibition in partnership with Black Gravity, funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It's called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Home.
Explain that now. We talked about Black Rock. Now you're talking about Black Gravity.
Black Gravity is a social impact investment platform that is looking to raise money to address things like home and land and creating equitable access
and the Johnson Foundation supports that.
And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has been a big supporter in really creating a pivot in how we look at the ecosystem of homes. So they have funded not only my work, but Black Gravity's work and others that really are about creating healthy and just neighborhoods. And we did have that at one point in the not too distant past, of neighborhoods that were somewhat diverse. So you got to be exposed to difference. I think we're more segregated today than before.
As I listen to you, I detect that you believe diversity is a strength to democracy, not a weakness. And so that leads me to New Jersey is a blue state, and there are red states, and there are purple states. So as Vesey attempts to create these neighborhood corporations for development, how do you distinguish between those opportunities where the governmental policy of the state or the governmental policy of the municipality seems to be building up more roadblocks than pathways? How do you take what you're doing in New Jersey and take it to Alabama or Mississippi?
I think our approach, again, is a market-driven approach. And we can't purport that we're a market society or free market society or nation and then stagnate those who have the same concept. BlackRock doesn't seek approval when they go in and they purchase. They don't care if it's blue, red, or purple. They're doing what they do. And I think we amplify that through the work that we're doing, is that our goal is really to structure democracy in a way that it's more ascertainable, that it shows up.
Does that mean more inclusive?
It's definitely more inclusive, because we have a history, a 400+ year history that has been very exclusive. But we have had the ability to say and hold those words, that creed, that foundational principle of all are created equal. We have to hold on to that.
You used the terminology of the marketplace.
Yes.
Market principles. So if diversity is good for business, it's good for advancing in the marketplace, then why do we have this resistance?
I think we haven't done it, in my opinion, all honest, is that we've done it in a way that has not shown the value of the diversity of the market, right? And we're one segment, right? We're showing that through recalibration, through asset acquisition, we can create diverse neighborhoods in a way that is livable, that respects difference, that respects different options. I think that there's a deep history of psychology, like a psychological embedding of hierarchy. And I think that that's what we're trying to address, right? I don't have all the answers, and I'll be the first to admit it, but I know we have to do something, because if we don't, we are losing our democratic presence.
I don't think anyone is born with that psychology. I don't think anybody is born with that lack of self-esteem or lack of self-appreciation. It's a part of the socialization, the part of the miseducation. So how does Vesty, given your mission, work to ensure that there's some re-education, there's some opening up new pathways for communities so they can overcome the psychology that you've expressed?
And we do something called house talks. And I want to give like a tangible example. So we end up acquiring our first asset, which is the first project under Vesey, which is a 1900 Queen Anne Victorian, beautiful home. And we opened it up. And we've invited people from all different backgrounds, whether they're Republican, Democrats, in between. They're all American to some form or extent, or believe in the aspirations of the American dream.
When you say opening up to programs, receptions, how do you open it up?
We open our doors and we host living room talks. So just like you and I are having this conversation, we throw a couple of couches and chairs and we invite community members and we circulate this over and over again so that we are in shared space together.
From your perspective, these living room discussions begins to open up a pathway.
Absolutely, because we then realize we're not so different from each other in what we want. Everyone wants safe, secure, livable spaces. People want to enjoy barbecues. People want to roller skate on their... We're not different. And when we create the spaces that build that fellowship, and we don't just do talking, we break bread with each other as well. And it really creates this connectivity that lasts way beyond that couch talk or living room talk, right? Now I'm introduced to someone that I otherwise would not have been in space with, in a more relaxed home setting.
How do you get an invitation to one of these?
It's open invitation. We make an announcement to whether it's our partners or school, neighborhood. It's always open, and people show up. And it's like a good old house party where we have really interesting conversations. We invite guest speakers that talk about shared ownership models, for example, of what Vessi is doing, but even beyond cooperative housing, the importance of impact investment. So you're learning while you're breaking bread.
So party with a purpose.
Yes.
I'm from the South, North Carolina, and throughout the South, there's tremendous land loss because people either don't have a trust or a will. It goes to probate. Probate winds up taking 15 to 30% of the property. How do you promote land acquisition and land preservation? Because families have access to millions of acres of land, but over the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, a lot of land has been lost because of the inattentiveness to taxes and other barriers.
It is a huge issue. We are losing land. We're losing opportunity, whether it's the South, the North, the Midwest, or the West. What we need and what Vessi is trying to do is really create this opportunity within our structure to address heirs' property rights, entanglements, et cetera, but we need the investment, right? First and foremost, if you don't have the investment to deal with the tax liens or the issues or the lawyer fees, then the loss is going to naturally happen. But if we can really raise the investment, that's purpose-driven, right? It's not just about acquisition. It gives us more leverage to show up at the table and say, well, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. It gives us options. So that is our hope, is to really create the investment arm so that we're able to then slice that out so that we're addressing all of these issues.
In many communities of color, the terminology investment seems to be something far out of reach because most people are trying to take care of their basic requirements to live and to keep what they have without fear of losing it. And a lot of times the risk factor in investments keeps communities of color out of the marketplace. They don't go to the Wall Street Journal and read what the stocks are doing. But how do we take these complexities and break it down so people at the grassroots level not only comprehend what you're saying, what Vessi is doing, but want to participate? Because to me, market participation, investment participation is the best education.
And I love what you're saying, and I think it's a dichotomy. I think education on how you can invest or what investment means comes twofold. I think it's actually doing the work so that you can show better than you can just tell, right? So it's not theoretical. Like
right,
I said,
experiential learning.
That's right. So inviting people into the 27 Perdicaris home in Trenton, we go through this explanation, right? What our monthly costs are, how housing costs are, it's 9 out of 10 times more than 30%. So I think in creating actual models, that's part of our strategy in education, educating the public on the value of shared ownership models. And it's teaching that that investment can be used in different ways that actually bring greater return for that individual. And we have models that have shown this, whether it's in the Bronx amalgamated housing or Co-op City, right? People pay rent and get nothing back. Amalgamated in Co-op City, you own certain shares of this co-op.
So there's equity.
There's equity coming into this.
And right now, in a lot of our communities of color, we're basically consumers. So how does Vessi get this, what I would call primary financial literacy, to communities that are in so desperate need of it?
It's going to be a multi-pronged approach. And again, when people are in their day-to-day and they're living, to your point, and they're consuming, it's stopping and saying, look at how you're consuming and how is that bringing value back to your community. And I'm going to say it again, for me, it's showing better than I can tell. It isn't bad that investment's coming in and creating use of spaces that for far too long were disinvested in. It's how that's happening and how purpose is more than 9 out of 10 times not there.
All of what you've known, all of what you experienced, what gives you your greatest hope today?
I'm a mother of 5 children. And when they get up and they talk to me about aspirations, about what they want out of life, it gives me hope to say, this is what it's for. This is what we get up every day to ensure that when they pledge allegiance, or when they step into the halls of Congress, or they take a trip to the Washington Monument, that the words all are created equal, that unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness has significance. That gives me hope and agency to ensure that we scale our shared humanity, and not just for us, but for the next 250 years of America.
The oneness of our humanity. Thank you, April de Simone, for being with us on How to Get Your Money Right.
Thank you so much.